Hello, everyone who's turned up today. Thank you so much for coming to the first of our IOP medical physics careers in the application of physics to medicine event that we're running. Um, I'm Megan. I'm hosting the event today and sharing the talks. And as I'm sure you know, this session is going to be all about learning about the diverse world of medical physics, what careers there are in medical physics, and the sort of roles you could have where the skills you've learned on your degrees or you're learning on your degrees can be applicable to the world of medical physics. And then also we're going to end up with some nice careers training that's a bit more general. So let me run you through the schedule really quickly. So we're going to start off with a nice overview of medical physics led by Anna Barnes. And then we're going to run into some industry talks where Philip Marsden and Ashley Tyler are going to talk about their experience working in medical physics in industry. And that'll be followed by a Q&A panel where we'll have some questions from you guys, which you can either put in the chat or raise your hand when we get there. And then we'll have a quick break and we'll round it all off with some careers training by Emma Ford, who's our careers facilitator for this event. So if you have questions, just put them in the chat. We may or may not have time, but we'll address them at the end of the talks if we do have time. And then for the Q&A, that'll be a bit more structured, as I said, and I'll run through that when we get to it. So yeah, this is run by the IUP Medical Physics Special Interest Group. So if you enjoy today's event, please do sign up to the IOP and join the special interest group to keep events like this running and obviously to join some of the other exciting events that we do. So without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker, Anna Barnes. Now, Anna is a registered clinical scientist. She's the director of the King's College Technical Evaluation Centre and joint head of medical physics and clinical engineering at Guy's and St Thomas's NHS Foundation in London. So the perfect person to give us a lovely introduction and overview to the world of medical physics on a wider scale. So Anna, let me hand over to you. Oh, I think you're on
Yeah,
mute.
sorry. Hi, everyone. I'm just trying to sort out. I haven't done sharing slides on Zoom before, but can you see?
Yeah, we can see everything. Yeah.
Okay. Oh no, I knew this was going to happen. My cat had joined us. Sorry, just a moment. I'm going to shut her out. Okay, bad timing, everyone. I do apologise. She just decided to. She's very annoying. Right. Okay. Right. This was a talk I gave before to my stepdaughter's school, which is why it's still Smani stepmom. I do apologise.
Annette,
And
you're
yeah.
sharing you want to share
Oh no,
presenter,
I'm
you need to
sharing the wrong
click.
bit.
Just do swap
Oh yeah,
displays.
yeah, yeah. Swap displays. There we go. Got it. It's much easier actually to do
Lovely.
in Zoom than it is in in Teams. Yes, sorry. Yes, so I finished being president of the Institute of Physics and Engineering in Medicine a couple of months ago. I'm now past president. I'm currently joint head of medical physics and clinical engineering at Guy's and St Thomas's. And I'm just about to come to the end of my time as director of King's College Technology Evaluation Centre, but still happy to talk all about that. Okay, so now let's see if we can do this bit. So I'm just going to do an explanation of what we do, which is actually a link. And now I need to change what I'm sharing. Right. And now I need to share different screen. Oh, why is this always so complicated? Share. There we go. Okay.
Did you know that scientists play a vital role in the NHS every day? We hear about cutting-edge research and innovation, but it takes a lot of scientific expertise to introduce all these new ideas into the NHS. By applying the latest knowledge and using cutting-edge science and technology, scientists are continually improving care. They keep everything working safely and effectively, so they make a big difference to the quality of patients' lives and the care they receive. There are 50,000 healthcare scientists working in the NHS across the UK, in more than 50 different areas of science. They deliver more than 1 billion diagnostic tests every year. And even though they only make up 5% of the healthcare workforce, healthcare scientists provide input that is critical to 80% of all diagnoses. But scientists don't just work in hospitals. New technology brings their services into the community and into patients' homes. Science and technology touches all aspects of our healthcare throughout our lives, from before we're even born until after we die. Some healthcare scientists work in labs doing tests or groundbreaking research. Some of them work with patients directly. Some develop the amazing technology that we use every day and keep it working. Science and technology is dramatically changing the way healthcare is delivered, and NHS healthcare scientists are right at the heart of it. Their work is bringing a healthcare revolution into the NHS. Because they are natural innovators and problem solvers, they can find all kinds of brilliant solutions every day and have the ability to transform how we treat patients. But all of them are bringing the science of tomorrow to the NHS today. By working together across different areas and with other health professionals, healthcare scientists are making the NHS stronger. Their ideas make diagnosing diseases more accurate and continually improve treatment and monitoring over time. Want to hear more about the amazing work of healthcare scientists? We have networks across the UK and collaborate with a wide range of partners and stakeholders. So get in touch and see how we can help you.
So that was one part of what we do. And I will just go to my slides again. And can everyone see that slide okay? Am I in the right display mode? Okay, good. So as I mentioned, I was the president of Physics and Engineering in Medicine. So you can go to our website and have a look. We also affiliated with the IOP. We have reciprocal arrangements for membership. And obviously we get involved in the medical physics group at the Institute of Physics. So there are lots of different professions in healthcare science, but I'm highlighting the ones about physics and engineering because that's what we're here to talk about. And as you can see, there's quite a lot there of specialisms that we get involved in. Interestingly, clinical photography is there as well, which is really about sort of funny. It sits sort of in between pathology and the physical sciences, really, because it's about digitizing pathology specimens into a media that we can then do some further analysis on. Here are some examples of the kind of equipment we work in, and I've chosen these ones because these are ones that I've sort of worked in. So the one at the top, sort of pale blue, is CT scanning, and we're doing a water phantom, and we do some set image acquisitions on the phantom so that we can then look at the image quality, which will then tell us something about how the machine is performing. The one to the sort of in the middle is for one of our nuclear medicine scans, and that's just one of the displays we can use to adjust the gamma cameras, the single photon emission tomography detectors, to pick up radiopharmacy from patients. Just below that is a PET-CT scanner, so the same sort of technology, but different emitter of gamma rays. And then the one down the bottom is radiotherapy, but that's just 3 of the different places we do. We also work a lot in radiation safety as well. Okay, so now for another go at, where's my stop sharing? Another go at doing this. What does a medical physicist do? Oops. Sorry.
You were sent to.
Oh, sorry, I know this is a bit painful. I'm just trying to work. Just stop sharing. Oh, I've lost it now. I was what? Oh, there we go. Window. Oh, I've lost the stop sharing screen thing. Can someone tell me where it is? Why can't I see it? Why is this difficult?
Sorry, Anna, what you're wanting to
I
share
need
any
to,
more?
there it's okay. I found it now. Sorry.
Oh,
Sorry.
bless.
I apologize.
Oh, don't worry.
Here we go. Okay. Sorry.
Grab something in the pantry.
Sorry.
It was a few minutes ago. But you decided to sneak in some Black Friday deals. To 40% off. It was first of December.
Hello, my name's Laura Sinclair, and I'm a medical physicist working in hospitals. I specialise in nuclear medicine and diagnostic radiology. Previously, I did my PhD in nuclear physics at the University of York, and I worked in laboratories in Finland and Japan. You may be wondering why a physicist is working in a hospital, so let me explain. Medical physics deals with the interactions of matter and energy in medicine. It is the application of physics to healthcare. We use physics for patient imaging, treatments, and measurements. Medical physicists are involved in a lot of different diagnostic and treatment technologies found within the hospital, including ultrasound, radiotherapy, phototherapy, lasers, MRI, radiography, CT, fluoroscopy, PET, and nuclear medicine. Nuclear medicine is a unique branch of medicine. We attach radioactive materials to a pharmaceutical, a drug, which can be injected, inhaled, or swallowed in capsule form. We can use those radiopharmaceuticals, as we call them, to image or treat patients. The particular radiopharmaceutical we use determines where the radioactive material is deposited within the body. In the case of imaging, the radiopharmaceuticals give off energy in the form of gamma rays that are detected by a specialized camera called a gamma camera. It works a bit like your optical camera. It takes visible light rays and focuses them with a lens to create an image. We can't see gamma rays, but the gamma camera can focus them with a collimator and then process them through a set of electronics to create an image. The workhorse radionuclide in nuclear medicine is known as technetium-99m, which has a half-life of 6 hours. This means the radiopharmaceutical stays radioactive long enough to be absorbed by the body for the imaging procedure, but not so long that it causes a large dose of radiation to the patient. Nuclear medicine imaging can be used in a variety of ways. We can use it to assess if there's an infection after knee replacement surgery, to assess how well the kidneys are functioning for potential live donor kidney transplants, to detect cancerous tumours, or to assess how well the blood is flowing to the heart. But we can use nuclear physics for more than imaging. We can use it to treat diseases as well. We can use radionuclides to target a particular region within the body, such as a tumour, with alpha, beta, and gamma radiation. We use this type of therapy to treat blood disorders, hypothyroidism, and specific types of cancer. An example of this is the use of radioactive iodine to treat thyroid cancer. The human body cannot distinguish between radioactive iodine and dietary iodine. When radioactive iodine 131 is ingested in the form of a capsule, it enters the bloodstream and is taken up by the thyroid. The iodine 131 atoms decay and emit radiation in the form of beta and gamma rays, which kills thyroid cells. So medical physicists play a vital role within the hospital. Nuclear medicine equipment relies on complex physics principles. Physicists like me make sure that the equipment is set up, tested, and running correctly and safely. So we need a clear understanding of the physics fundamentals on which the technology is based. Physicists also work on image reconstruction and data analysis to help find the best ways to gather and make sense of the medical data. Physicists work to achieve a balance of image quality and radiation dose when using nuclear medicine equipment. So clearly, when working with radioactive materials, we need to understand how to measure and limit the amount of radiation given to the patients, as well as hospital staff and even members of the general public. So medical physicists need to know in detail how radiation interacts with the body to give an accurate estimation of radiation dose. We can control exposure time, use shielding, and employ the use of the inverse square law of distance to keep radiation exposure as low as possible to protect members of staff and members of the general public. Understanding the diversity of half-lives, the radiation characteristics of known isotopes, the search for new isotopes, radiation instrumentation, radiation protection, data handling, and data analysis techniques are all used in the field of medical physics. Being a medical physicist is such a wonderful job. Each day is so varied. No 2 days are alike. And I get to learn something new every day. And the best part of my job is that I get to use my physics knowledge to make a difference in people's lives.
Okay, so
why are photographers ditching their
that's a little bit of a taster of how we of our jobs in the hospital. And I'm just going to bring up my slides again. Now I have to work out how to do the stop share. Okay, so tell you a little bit about my career. So this is me, and I started off doing a physics and astronomy undergraduate degree, and then I joined at University of Glasgow. And then from there, I joined the clinical scientist training program in Scotland. Oh yes, that's right. I also did the summer project at NASA in their solar physics group, which was great fun. And the reason I'm telling you this is just so you can understand that, you know, it's not a closed trajectory. You know, a lot of people decide they're going to do medicine when they're doing their A levels. And while I had an interest in physics and physics applied to medicine, you know, I always loved doing the astrophysics part. But by the time I got to the end of my degree, I realized that actually maybe I didn't actually want to be, you know, sit in an observatory for, you know, hours on end, and actually don't really get to look through telescopes anymore. It's all digital signal processing. I also got a chance to do some clinical engineering work with WHO, and the reason that there's a picture of the Himalayas there is because I went to Nepal with colleagues at Kathmandu, and then we were doing transfer of clinical scientist training while I was there. And then after I finished my clinical scientist training in Glasgow, I decided I sort of wanted to spread my wings a bit and do, and I'd also done a PhD, and I wanted to do postdoctorate somewhere else. So I moved to New York for a little while. And I worked in Parkinson's and also looking at brain mapping in neurology and psychiatry, which took me finally to Cambridge, where I carried on my postdoc work in psychiatry and neurology, which I'll tell you about a little bit going forward. Then I decided to move on from Cambridge, and I took up a post as lead clinical scientist at University College Hospital. And because I'd been doing work in both positron emission tomography imaging and in MRI, I was in an ideal place to lead on the hybrid PET MRI scanner that was deployed clinically at University College Hospital. And I also held 2 NIHR research fellowships at UCL during that time. Then I became a fellow and president of Institute of Physics and Engineering. And finally, I then joined King's College London, having worked at NHS England for a little while during COVID, actually, looking at how healthcare scientists could contribute to the recovery of services. And also now I'm at St Thomas's Hospital, Guy's and St Thomas's Hospital. So I've had a very varied career, and I wanted to really talk about that because, as I said, I think when we're at school, it's not really clear to us how you can mix and match and have a really varied career. But something like physics or chemistry or engineering or mathematics can be that sort of fundamental basic knowledge from which you can do all of these things going forward, which is why I love the Institute of Physics, because it tells you all about that and has all these amazing resources. And I, think it's, at the risk of alienating my other scientific colleagues in chemistry and engineering, I do think that having an undergraduate physics degree can really launch you in so many different directions. So let me tell you a little bit about...
Stop your displays again.
Oh, sorry. So let me tell you a little bit about the work that I did. So when I trained as a healthcare scientist back in the 90s, I was very lucky in that I was working at a Glasgow hospital. It was called the Southern General now, it's called Elizabeth II, in their neurology department. And they had one of only 2 very specially dedicated brain imaging SPECT cameras that looked a bit like a CT or a PET CT does now. And I just sort of fell in love with brain imaging, basically. And during that time, and so what I've got up here is all the different ways you can image the brain. And what I then really enjoyed doing, and this is what was so special about being a physicist and a clinical scientist in that world, is that I wasn't trapped by just sticking to one modality. So I was able to look right across the board at all the different radiopharmaceuticals, all the different MR techniques, all the different CT techniques, and be able to bring them all together to start telling the story about the brain. Whereas if you're a radiologist, you'll tend to specialize in either CT or MRI. You can retrain as a nuclear medicine physician and learn about PET, but you very rarely do the whole thing together. And so this really puts us in an incredibly unique position to make an informed and wide collation of evidence, and then talk to the radiologists and the medics about what these images are showing us and how you bring all of that information together. And so here what we have is these grey scale ones are all MRI up here. This one over here is actually something called magnetic resonance spectroscopy. So that's actually, if you cast your mind back to A-level chemistry, what's amazing about this now is that you take your magnetic resonance spectroscopy that you do on the bench, and you can create an image out of it and sort of show the different molecular concentrations in different parts of the brain. And then this one down here is the CT image. The other ones, the more brightly coloured ones, they're all different radiopharmaceuticals. So this one here is looking at blood flow in the brain. I should say this is a slice right through the middle. So from your eyes back to your occipital lobe. And then these ones up here are all different radiopharmaceuticals for looking at the area of the brain that's responsible for smooth motor control, so-called the basal ganglia. And this is the area that gets affected not only by Parkinson's disease, but also dementia with Lewy bodies and other movement disorder types. And they're a mixture of single photon emission tomography and positron emission tomography. My research then was really about, as I said, bringing all these different pieces of information together and using, basically sort of multivariate statistical models to talk about, to sort of use mathematical models to explain what was happening in the brain in terms of mechanisms and physiology, and then being able to translate or map that onto clinical relevant details that can inform therapies and treatment, and understand what disease mechanisms as well. So I've got one up here of the Mandelbrot set. That was because we were using complex maths to look at time series data from the brain, and we found that there were statistical oh gosh, I've forgotten how to explain now. That so no matter what the scale was, whether you were looking at high frequencies to low frequencies, the statistical properties were the same. And you can use complex math metrics to look at brain, and we were able to show that that a normal working brain, and this is true also in cardiac imaging as well, or with the heart, is that you can have the chaotic nature of a well body tells you how well something is, whereas as soon as it starts to go into something that's very predictable, then you're having problems. So if you think about in terms of adaptability, so your heart will display chaotic properties over time because you need it to be adaptable and quickly responsive to outside external stimuli, and that is true of your brain as well. So what we found was, as people developed dementia or other neurological aging conditions, that the brain rhythms began to get into a sort of very slow, regular rhythms, whereas actually what you want is this sort of chaotic behavior shown in the sort of a well-responsive predictive brain. And the other thing to add here as well is that this is all the precursor to the machine learning algorithms and deep learning algorithms that are now. So if you understand this, you will understand AI and the particular types of AI. Not so much large language models, obviously, and generative AI, but all of these things around the chaotic maths, complex maths, using statistical properties of images to pull out features, etc., that can tell us about the illness itself. So that was all my research, and applied this to various NIHR fellowships. Right, so the last couple of slides here is how do you become a healthcare scientist? Well, so there are different ways of doing it, and it has changed over the years. So essentially what you can do is, if you already have a PhD or an MSc, you can apply for a healthcare science job at a hospital already. And then once you're in that job, you can then go on to a formal training program that will take you towards becoming a healthcare professional, registered healthcare professional, or HCPC registered. And you can do that by either joining a very formal NHS England program. If you're in Scotland, they have their own version of it, and the same for Northern Ireland and Wales. Or you can do either an apprenticeship, or you can do the IPEM, the Institute of Physics and Engineering Medicine also provide a training scheme through the Association of Clinical Scientists, which also takes you towards getting HCPC registration. in all of these cases, what you do is you put together a portfolio of all of your work. If you already have a PhD, then once you get a job in a hospital, it should take you 2 or 3 years to put your portfolio together and have your HCPC registration. And usually you can progress quite quickly up the careers ladder in order to get there. The scientist training program, which is sponsored by NHS England, usually takes people either straight from an undergraduate degree, or they may or may not have an MSc beforehand. You don't have to be an HCPC registered clinical scientist to work as a healthcare scientist, and in which case we would encourage people to go along the apprenticeship route, and then that allows you to train in whichever area that sort of takes your fancy. You know, it's audiology or neurophysiology or radiation physics, etc., clinical engineering as well. And finally, and just to let everybody know, and this is why I was telling the A-level students, that you don't need to be an Einstein, and actually we need less of those maverick geniuses, and we need really good technology savvy people coming in, doing those service jobs that we absolutely need and are desperate. We have so many vacancies in NHS at the moment, where people need to have a science degree, an MSc in some sort of technical field, because we just have hundreds of jobs that we can't fill. So, and what I can say is, although, yes, it is quite difficult in the NHS at the moment, we pay extremely well. We have excellent holidays. You will have a permanent job. You do not have to raise money for grants. And you have an excellent pension as well when you do finally retire. So that's my little advert for the NHS. And although I've bounced in and out, I began my training in the NHS, and now I will end my career in the NHS. So that's where I am now, having gone all around the world and all in different academia and industry. Oh yes, I forgot to mention that I did work for GE Healthcare for a year as well, which was interesting. So if you have any questions, please go ahead. I think we've got a little while, haven't we?
We have like 1 or 2 minutes, so maybe time for a quick question. Or if you put them in the chat, I'm sure Anna would be happy to answer some of them in the chat. But if we have no immediate questions, then we might move on. That was a really good talk, Anna. Thank you so much.
A bit of a whirlwind. I now have to work out how to stop sharing my screen.
I think I can.
Can you do it? Thanks, Phil. Sorry, I hope it wasn't.
I've got it. There you go.
Okay, thank you. So, do you want me to stick around for a bit? Shall I do that? Shall I just lurk in the background, or?
Oh, I think we have one quick question. In the chat, which we've got time for, if you can answer it briefly. Which is, how do you see the career changing over the next 20 years?
Oh, excellent question. Excellent question. Okay. So, I guess what I'm finding now is that as a physicist with a sort of interest in mathematics, data, if you can really hone your statistical skills, your data analytics skills, your scripting skills, that is really where we need to go. And I think what will happen is, or if you're more on the people side of things, then do some work around, sort of behavioral change theory, organizational restructuring, because what I'm finding is that any jobs that can get taken over by, digital, data mining or machine learning or things like that, get around that. But the people skills, you can't teach a computer to do that. How do I balance the mixture of academic clinical roles? So when I had a fellowship, it was 50-50. So the NIHR gave me money and they bought out 50% of my time at the hospital, and I give that to the hospital and they employ someone else to do the other half of my job. It's challenging because sometimes it takes a while to get that backfill, we call it. But you have to be quite strict with, right, Mondays and Tuesdays is my academic day and these are my days, or you can split it between mornings and afternoons, whatever you think is, but you do have to be really strict with yourself, very boundaried. That can be hard. especially if you're the kind of person who likes to help. And actually, if you can take yourself out of the clinical department, that makes a huge difference. So they just can't see you. That was when I was doing my fellowship in the NHS. Now, I have 2 different jobs. So 2 days a week I work for KCL, and I go over to KCL and I teach and I write papers and do my research. And the other 3 days a week I'm in the hospital. So again, it's quite a lot about location. And that's good, because if you're out of sight, you're out of mind. People who go, could you just help me with this? Could you just help me with that? So that's what I would say.
Lovely.
It's possible to do.
I think we're going to have to move on briefly.
Yes,
if
no,
that's
that's
okay.
fine. Just email me if you have anything else.
Are we not keeping Anna until the end? Can we, or are you?
Yeah, no, I'll stick around. I'll just
feel free to answer any questions in the chat if they come up. But I think that was a really good talk. Thank you, Anna. A good show of the different sides of medical physics. If you're interested in clinical science, our session next week is going to cover the application for STP and all that in a lot more detail as well. But we're going to move to having an industry focus now. So our next speaker is Philip Marsden, who works for Magnetic Shields, where he is the R&D manager there. And he works designing shielding devices across the sector, so clinical and non-clinical stuff. And he's going to talk about his, as he describes it, meandering path into industry, and talk about what the sector's like and give you some pointers to see if it's for you. So by all means, Philip, take it away. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan. Anna Barnes, you're a difficult act to follow. That's all I'm saying. Okay, so actually, I am going to talk about that. This is going to be even less structured than Anna's talk, and I'm not brave enough to put videos in it, so apologies. So yeah, I'm head of R&D at Magnetic Shields. I also have a position as a medical device consultant for Circa Magnetics, and we'll hear a bit more about that in the next talk. And I also have a visiting fellowship at Loughborough in the Applied Radiation and Medical Physics group. I got it right. Yes. Okay, so career, how do we do it? Yeah, well, you start at school, you go through university, and well, maybe just hang around for a bit, do a couple of postdocs, and you're in industry, right? Well, it doesn't really work like that. I ended up sort of going to the wrong school. I'm not going to go into the details of that. I almost failed the 11 plus, got into the wrong grammar school, not the one that my parents wanted me to get into. I applied for Cambridge, I failed, and my second choice was Southampton. For my PhD, I applied for Cambridge again. I again failed to get in, and I went back to Southampton and did my PhD. I randomly got into a quantum optics group. So my PhD we'll talk about was in semiconductor physics. I randomly went into a quantum optics group for a year, realized I was massively out of my depth, went back into semiconductor physics, and then fell out of academia into industry. So that's my career. This is what people think it should look like. It doesn't. It looks like that or worse. I suspect that mine actually had the loops in it. But we'll get there. So this was me. This is where I sort of started my professional journey in science. I mean, I like science. I wasn't too bad at it, despite what I might have said a minute ago. This was the year 2000. I'm 25. I am naive as hell. I don't yet know what I don't know. And this was the 4th year of my 3-year PhD. So you can see how well this was going at this point in time. I did 4 years of PhD. I then did these 2 postdocs. The first one is the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm. So like Anna, I decided to wander around the world, and I've done quite a lot of that since. I was working in the quantum optics group in KTH in Stockholm. We were generating very bright entangled photon pairs for quantum cryptography and quantum teleportation. I went back into the University of Toronto, where we were doing fun experiments with lasers and parametric oscillators that you can now buy off the shelf for a couple of £100, but we built them ourselves back in the day. And you can see there was absolutely no health and safety back in the day. This is me with a 12 Tesla magnet and a cryostat. So this was all good fun, but actually it turned out I wasn't a very good academic. I wasn't really interested in writing the papers. I definitely wasn't interested in writing grant proposals. And pretty much after 2 postdoc positions, I decided that academia wasn't for me. In fact, probably the truth is probably more that academia had decided that I wasn't for it. It was the end of an era, and I moved back to the UK from Canada. And I have to say, I'd spent 12 years in uni and school before that, and I had absolutely no idea where I was going. I was absolutely terrified. I can honestly say, from a career perspective and actually a life perspective, it was probably the worst time in my life. I had no idea what I was doing. So I tried various things, including being a line chef in Wagamama. But ultimately, I moved into industry in the 3rd of July 2006, and I joined a company called Filmlight in Soho, designing these things. So these are world-class high-resolution celluloid film scanners. This is, well, back in the day, what we used to do is Steven Spielberg and Kubrick and the like would shoot onto camera negative. That was effectively an analog format, and then we would scan it in very, very slowly, 4 frames a second, very high resolution. And before you did all of the editing and post-production, special effects, color correction, etc. I thought this was a pretty good move, but in 2008, Sony brought out the first backed-in CCD for actually then consumer cameras, but it very quickly got to CMOS-based professional digital motion picture cameras like this one. By 2010, there were 3 companies already producing those, including Sony. Well, the result was Eastman Kodak filed for bankruptcy in 2012 as the bottom fell out of the market, and the market for the 8K pin-registered film scanner pretty much evaporated overnight. We literally went from 1 year selling these things at £500,000 each to seeing them on eBay for 20 grand a year later. So I needed to find another career. And I thought, well, I like imaging. I'm pretty good at it. I've done single photon imaging. So where do I go next? I didn't really know what I was going to do, but I realized at this point, nothing lasts forever. And I knew it was all going to be okay this time, because I'd been through this once and I knew it couldn't get any worse. And it wasn't. And I thought, well, a good place to go next is probably an imaging modality that's always going to be needed, and medical imaging was that choice that I made. So March 2012, I joined what was then a division of PerkinElmer, which is PerkinElmer Medical Imaging, as the engineering manager. We were making these things out of these. So these are basically silicon wafers where you cut the crusts off and you're left with a rectangle. We put one of them into this guy, which you would use for extremity X-ray or small CT. And we also, our flagship product was this, which was a digital mammography system. Sorry, I have managed to lose my screen. There you go, which is a digital mammography system. It's got a very, the edge of the detector is very close to this wall, so you can go right up to the abdomen of the patient and not lose any part of the image. I very quickly found myself, so the software manager left 3 months later, and I found myself in charge of a team of 15 designing medical devices. So I got electronics engineers, mechanical engineers, firmware engineers, software engineers, and physicists or imaging scientists. And we were designing these things. I actually only lasted about 1 year and 9 months in PerkinElmer. It was a real trial by fire. It was a US management. We started calls at about 7 o'clock in the morning with Frankfurt and finished them about midnight with Santa Clara. It was an interesting political environment, but it taught me a lot about how to do medical device engineering and how not to do medical device engineering, frankly. From that, I actually formed my own company, but I'm not going to go into the details there, only to give you a flavor of what the scope of medical physics or clinical engineering or healthcare engineering is within the industrial setting. So it doesn't really matter if you're making a medical or an in vitro device. Physics is kind of this bit over here. There's a lot more that goes into this. I've worked with a lot of startups over the years. I've worked with big companies like PerkinElmer, but critical to everything is the time and the cash. Having an experienced team who know about how to manage all this correctly. Here's our engineers and scientists down here, but a lot of people to make sure that we conform to regulatory standards, quality standards, and manage this. In a company, there's a lot of emphasis put on protecting your intellectual property, whether that's patents or just keeping know-how secret. There's a huge amount of documentation that we have to produce for the regulator. That forms a large fraction of this. That was actually one of the failings of, I should be very clear actually, PerkinElmer Medical Imaging no longer exists as a business entity, which is why I'm talking about it. PerkinElmer still exists. And then a huge part of this is around the regulatory compliance, whether that's for the European community under the medical device regulations, the Food and Drug Administration, US regulations, or other countries. Every country has a slightly different regulation. There's a big part of medical device engineering, which is usability engineering. You can make the best medical device in the world, but if there are ways of using it the wrong way, this is the classic, if you can use it the wrong way, your users will use it the wrong way. And there's a huge amount of that that's usability engineering, which is looking about failure modes and mapping out that user experience. We maybe come back to this in a minute. There's a whole bunch of financial stuff around commercial viability, especially given how much cash it costs to get through the regulatory hurdles. I'm not going to go in too much detail. There's a bunch of requirements that you need, which you need your clinical colleagues to tell you what this thing needs to do. I need Anna to tell me, what's wrong with the current systems, how we make it better, or how we have to change it completely to conform to different radio. Thanks, Anna. To different, different disease indications, different radiopharmaceuticals. There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into here, which needs a lot of analysis. Then, of course, all of the requirements of the application itself. Again, really important to the clinical pathway. You actually have to map that into the design from the beginning. And then this is the kind of bit that medical physicists, healthcare engineers get involved in, which is the design. But actually, we have to keep a weather eye on all of this. But interestingly, in my experience of seeing physicists in these roles, I see physicists in physics roles, but I also see them in electronics roles, mechanical roles, firmware roles, and a lot of usability engineering. This is the problem solving that physicists are actually really good at. It's like, what can go wrong with this thing? How do we design it so that that doesn't go wrong? We can get involved in all of this. Actually, what I missed at the beginning of this was to say, so Anna, you put down a kind of some options of how to get into medical physics in industry. There isn't a clear route in. You can pretty much actually get in through any of these branches. The obvious one here, but yeah, even the need for writing good technical documentation. Again, physicists really good at this. Okay, so those are the kind of the components that you need. So I'll be honest, working in medical devices is extremely challenging, but it's very, very rewarding. So there are a lot of technical standards. I've kind of written some of the ones which are more UK, EU standard centric here. We always have to work under an overarching quality control system. We have to find our requirements. We have to verify those requirements. We design to those requirements, and we verify that we've built the thing to the requirements that we initially specified. And then we need to validate to make sure those things fit for purpose. There's a whole bunch of things around risk and patient safety that you don't normally have in a hospital, because the hospital can normally take that risk if it's designed in hospital. If you're selling this to other people, that becomes a legal liability. And then there's a whole bunch of standards, including safety of electromechanical components, a lot of software. Every device has software in it nowadays. And I was talking about usability engineering a second ago. There's a standard associated with that. But here's a product I was involved in, this Sensei surgical product, which is a laparoscopic gamma probe, has a lot of electronics, a lot of software in there, and it had to satisfy the requirements of the disease indication. So have a look at senseisurgical.com. There's some good videos there. Okay, so just to kind of give you a feel, Anna's already given you a feel of the things that a requirement in the NHS. When within the medical device industry, we're looking forwards to the next generation of tools, the next generation of brain imaging tools or optical imaging, both in vitro and in vivo. I mean, these are things that I've worked on, right? So cytokine sensing was very popular around the pandemic for some reason. I've done a lot of alpha, beta, gamma spectrometry in vivo. Now much more involved in magnetic sensing and imaging. I won't go into the rest of the details, but today this is basically where I am, which is designing these magnetically shielded rooms. And Ashley's going to talk to you about the brain scanning that we do in those in a second. That was the whistle stop tour of medical physics, clinical engineering, healthcare engineering in industry. Feel free to link with me on LinkedIn, and you can catch me at that email address or put something in the chat. And thank you very much.
Lovely, thank you, Phil. If we hold questions, we've got the Q&A coming up in just a second. Now I'm going to hand over to Ashley, who, as Phil said, works for Circuit Magnetics. And after Ashley completed his MSci PhD at Nottingham, moved into industry and now works in R&D. So Ashley's just going to talk a bit about that move into industry and about securing a role and the sort of key skills that you might be able to use from your degrees if you want to move into industry. So Ashley, let me hand it over to you.
Can everyone see the screen? Great. Okay, so I'm Ashley Tyler. I'm the R&D lead at Circuit Magnetics. So I'm sort of come to talk to you today from the perspective of someone that's maybe a bit more recent into industry than to some of the people that we've had talk recently. So specifically, I'll talk a little bit about my career journey so far, sort of how I got here, what steps I've taken, and then I'll sort of mention why I chose the current role I'm in now. What did the application process look like? How did I end up in that role? And then I'll discuss a little bit about, what my current role is now. What does a typical day-to-day look like for me? And then finally, I'll end up with talking about some of the skills that, translated from my degree quite well into what I'm doing now. And then just maybe also give a few pointers about things that perhaps I wish that I'd known when I was sort of just finished my degree and was looking to get into work. So I, as Megan said, I did an integrated master's at the University of Nottingham. That started in 2012, and lucky me, that was the first year of the higher fees. And during my master's degree at the University of Nottingham, I had the opportunity to do a summer placement working on building a nitrogen vacancy magnetometer. So that basically utilizes atomically sized defects in nitrogen in order to sense magnetic fields. I quite enjoyed that summer placement, and I decided at the end of that placement that I would like to come back and build the full magnetometer rather than part of it. So I ended up doing a PhD in that, so building a scanning probe nitrogen vacancy sensor magnetometer, and I did that for 4 years. And by the time I'd done that, I ended up with something that looks a little bit like this. So that was something that I built in my PhD project. I quite enjoyed that sort of hands-on with hardware and software and developing new things for sort of applying my physics to build and make things, which I quite enjoyed that. And then at the end of my PhD, I decided that I sort of wanted to continue working in this area of sort of quantum sensing and apply the skills that I developed in my PhD, but maybe look for something where it's a bit less abstract and I actually get to work on tackling a few real world problems. And luckily for me, as my PhD finished, a group in the University of Nottingham's engineering department was recruiting for someone to investigate diamond sensing. So I made the big move 500 meters across campus. I went to be a postdoc in engineering, and here I got to work with sort of a few people that were working on sort of particular applications. So one application was I got to work with some chemists. So we were sort of developing some novel compounds, and we were using the diamond sensors to sort of investigate sort of novel behaviors. I also got the opportunity to work with some cell biologists. So you can see here we were investigating like cellular uptake of novel contrast agents and seeing if we could read it out with the diamond quantum sensors that we'd been developing. So as my sort of postdoc was winding down, I was wondering sort of whether academia was for me and what I was going to do next. And that's what led me to sort of take the next step. I quite enjoyed, doing the hands-on, being at the interface of sort of physics and sensing and quantum physics. But during my postdoc, I quite enjoyed the applied aspect, getting to solve some real-world problems. So I thought, what could possibly be more impactful than some of the real-world problems that the medtech sector is trying to tackle? So, being from Nottingham, I'd sort of heard of Circa. I sort of had friends in the research group that were working on sort of the brain sensing technology. So I had a bit of a feel for who Circa were and what they were doing and where they were trying to go. So how I got into this was I just sort of simply sent them an email, got in touch with them, sort of explained my skills profile, and then they sort of reached out to me and we had a chat about sort of some upcoming projects that they had and how my skills might fit into that and sort of see if we were a good culture fit for each other really. And we were, and that was sort of 3 years ago, and I'm still here. So I'll probably explain a little bit more about, what Circa are now and sort of what a typical day to day looks like for me. So Phil touched on it in the last talk, but Circa are a spin-out company from the University of Nottingham that's aiming to commercialise some of the research in OPM Meg that's gone there. So that's using optically pumped magnetometers. So that's a small quantum sensor that you can place near someone's scalp, and it measures the magnetic field from their brain. And that can tell us a few things about their neurology, and we can do all sorts of interesting neuroscience with it. I won't go into it too much now, but it's better than the state-of-the-art technology, which uses squid magnetometers, principally for sort of three reasons. One, it's quite a lot cheaper, so you get sort of better performance at a lower cost. And two, you can sort of wear it. You can do sort of naturalistic tasks, sort of do sort of neuroscience studies that perhaps wouldn't have previously been possible with sort of older versions of the technology. So what Circa do is they provide this whole brain scanning system. So a brain scanning system is more than just a few sensors. It's sort of all this hardware, software integration. So we have sort of magnetically shielded rooms that Phil develops. We have our sensors. We have softwares that measure the magnetic signals and then sort of processing to work out what's happening in your brain associated with that. So in my role as the R&D lead, I get to sort of work on a lot of activities that are improving this whole system that we're developing, sort of our product. So at the minute we're selling it as a research device, but we're really sort of actively developing and refining our product to make sure it's compliant to medical device standards so we can get it into clinical pathways and get it into hospitals. So I get to do a lot of technical work that I've sort of using the skills that I developed throughout my degree. So one of the things I've been working on is sort of a QA device for this system. So I've sort of taught myself a bit of basic PCB design, and I sort of get to write some code to process the data and all those kind of things. But in addition to sort of utilising those technical skills that I got at university, I've also had a chance to do sort of a few things that I perhaps wouldn't have had if I stayed in academia. For example, I get to interact with our customers now that are using our systems to do cutting edge neuroscience and work with them to make sure they get the best out of their system. One of the benefits in my role is we've also been able to travel quite a lot. So we sort of sell these systems all over the world. So usually teams of us scientists go out and set them up and install them. And I think I've got a picture of me here doing that. I am actually slightly happier than this picture suggests, but I don't actually have many pictures of me in the helmet. So that's that anyway. So that's kind of what my role looks like day to day, but what skills did I get from university that helped me to do that? So as I mentioned before, there's sort of a whole host of technical skills. In particular, coding is something I do quite a lot. I use Python and MATLAB more or less every day for some data processing and interfacing with hardware to collect data. I also still solve the odd integral every now and then. I get to use some of those mathematical skills. But in addition to sort of those technical skills that sort of help me do the role, I've also developed sort of quite a lot of soft skills at university that are really important. And I think two of the key ones are probably just sort of working on solving technical problems. It's quite important to be able to sort of, get some information and decide what action you want to take and plan experiments and activities that, help you generate something quite impactful from it. And then the other one is probably communication skills. So unlike today, I'm not usually talking to rooms full of physicists. Quite often, people from all different backgrounds come together to make a medical device work, and sort of being able to communicate those sort of technical concepts to people from different backgrounds is just a really, really useful skill that you start to develop at university. So I just want to end with a couple of the things that I wish I'd known when I'd just sort of finished my degree and was thinking about what my next steps were. The first one is probably don't underestimate the value of the transferable skills, like the ones I just talked about, sort of technical project management and sort of your communication skills. I think a good example of this is when I was doing my undergraduate, the my two worst modules by a substantial distance were experimental physics and electromagnetism. And now I'm sort of working on these systems that develop and sell magnetic field sensors across the world. And, we're hoping to get it into clinical practice. So don't underestimate the transferable skills. The other one is just make sure you leave room to grow. So I think when I was first looking at job applications, you can often see sort of a list of requirements, sort of technical skills or various experiences, and you can see that and you can go, oh God, I don't have all of those. I'm never going to get the job. But I actually think that's quite a good thing. If you apply for a job where you've got all of the skills and all of the experiences, perhaps you don't have room to grow. So if you see a job and you perhaps don't have all of the experience, maybe that's just an opportunity to learn something new and develop your skill set a little bit further. And that is pretty much all I wanted to say for now. So thank you for inviting me to talk.
Thank you, Ashley. That was really good. Really lovely to see what sort of stuff helped you on your degree and that pathway that both you and Phil have taken. That's a bit less direct into industry and took you a while to sort of find that and get established in it. We're into a Q&A section now, so if people want to write anything in the chat or they want to raise their hand on Zoom and ask some questions for Phil and Ashley about industry, that would be really great. I'll keep an eye on the chat. But to get us going, perhaps I'll oh yeah, and Anna as well. She's also still here. I think she is. I'll get us started. What would you guys recommend for someone who perhaps has come out of a physics degree and doesn't necessarily know what they want to do? They're struggling to like they haven't really found their like true path yet, but they're kind of interested in medical physics, interested in the physics that they're using. How would you recommend someone like that would go ahead who's perhaps feeling a bit anxious about that kind of decision?
Since I'm unmuted, I've seen it, and I get asked it actually quite a lot on LinkedIn. My advice is try something. The worst thing you can do is then try something else. And yeah, a bit like dating, you've got to kiss a lot of frogs until you find
No, I think it's so true actually, because you kind of think, oh gosh, this is it. I'm jumping on the thing that I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And as Phil's photo of a straight line, but actually it's much more wiggly. It's just yeah, you just jump in and try it for a little while. I mean, to be honest, I get a bit bored after about 4 or 5 years, so I change anyway. But that idea of having to choose something and then you carry on forever is I mean, that's a bit boring, isn't it?
Well, I think it also
that, not us.
Yeah, right. It's also good to try something that you're not good at. So
Yes.
I was a line chef in Wagamama for 3 months,
I
and I
did
was really
McDonald's.
bad at it. Really bad. I cooked undercooked gyoza, overcooked gyoza, especially the prawn one. It's not good to undercook the
Yeah.
prawns.
Yeah. That's so true.
So yeah, no, just try it. And if you're interested, and I see this for people who, especially if you've done an MSc or a PhD in some kind of healthcare engineering or medical physics related discipline. I think it's good to I mean, it's harder. I mean, Anna can say it's harder to go into the clinical side because there's a lot of commitment in that. But medical device industry, there are jobs out here. There are consultancy jobs. There are startups like Circa Magnetics. There are more established companies in the UK. We've got Electa, we've got Siemens, Magnetics, some radiation. There's 2 radiation detector companies. They're looking for junior people, good people, problem-solving people, the skills that Ashley's talked about, and then within that you can try different different paths. So just try something.
Lovely. Do we have any questions in the chat? Or anyone, feel free to put your hand up or on Zoom as well if you have any questions to ask.
And can I add something to that? Just from
Yeah.
a careers point of view, I'll talk a little bit about it later. The whole concept of career has changed anyway. So that piece about actually trying lots of new things, and whereas many years ago you'd have one career in one organization, now you may have 3 or 4 different careers in different organizations. So that fits in really well with what both Phil and Anna are saying in terms of how the market is as well a little bit. So.
Lovely. I think we've got a question in the chat asking, is there anywhere you would recommend to look for jobs? I don't know if you have anything, Ashley, I guess you perhaps have done a job application slightly more recently. Anywhere that any of you would recommend in terms of looking for jobs in this kind of field?
Oh, well, I mean, you just go to NHS Track Jobs and look up healthcare science. And then the application, so for that, is quite restricted because of the equity rules. So you can't, it's very fixed application form, and you might get asked to put in a statement about how you follow the hospital trust values or something like that. But usually it's very although it's a bit silly if you do they try and make it all anonymous, you see, but then as soon as you start talking about fellowships or awards or papers, it's not anonymous anymore. But yes, you just go on to NHS Track Jobs for the NHS.
How about for industry, Ashley or Phil?
Ash?
Yeah, I suppose I'm not necessarily the best person to give advice to, because my experience with Circa was I contacted them directly to see if to see if I was a good fit for them and they were a good fit for me. So I don't have too much recent experience of where to look exactly. So maybe Phil could give more generic advice across industry.
I can tell you where we advertise, and a lot of that is on LinkedIn and our website. So actually, the AI searches nowadays probably get you a lot closer, whether that's Google or Microsoft. Other browsers are available. I think that will get you quite a lot. I would also, you've got these people here who are on LinkedIn, most of them, I'm sure. Connect to them and you will see, cross-posting. That will form those, actually, again, those large data set AI links, which will pull those things towards you. So,
lovely. I think
if you want a medical device company, just Google list medical device companies in the UK and then go through each one, and each one will have a careers page. Circa does, MSL does.
Lovely. A question from Sophia, if you want to turn your microphone on.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to ask about when you say to try different jobs, I worry about kind of pigeonholing myself, because people say if you spend too long in academia, then industry won't want you, or if you go into industry, then it can be hard to get back into academia. Do you think there's any truth to that, or is it easy to, I can put this on too.
So personally, it's incredibly easy, but that's because I made sure that I kept my skill set up. So if you're in an NHS job, you do as much training as they give away for free as you can, project management, people management, difficult conversations, all of those kind of skills that aren't technical. Same thing when you're in academia, make sure that you stay in contact with all of your healthcare science. So for instance, I was in academia, remained a member of IPEM, made sure I got involved, stayed in contact with all of those, kept networking, kept submitting things to conferences. And then even when I was in industry, in a way, that's perfect, because then you get to go in both sides, right? You're collaborating with academia, but it's about going beyond your expertise into making yourself fit anywhere. So you're in control. You're in control of doing that.
What she said. But so I've done the same thing, right? So I've been in industry for a long time, but I've published with actually University of Bournemouth, with UCL, and now with Loughborough we've got publications in process. Actually, King's as well, on some of the radiopharma stuff. Yeah, you've got to keep it. Yeah, if you disappear out of academia for a while, that could be a barrier to get. I mean, also things change, so you've got to keep your finger on the pulse a bit. Yeah, I mean, I'm recruiting at the moment for a physicist. Just put that out here in this group. But I'm looking for a sort of experienced industrial physicist, and I've had quite a few experienced academics apply. And I have to say that there is a barrier there. They've got to convince me that they understand, manufacturing process, the quality control processes that we go through. All of the documentation is very different. There's a lot of paperwork, but it's very different paperwork. So I think, yeah, it's exactly what Anna said. If you can keep both streams going, it's not easy, but it can be very rewarding.
But can I just add to that, and I'll talk a bit about it. It's about being a bit strategic, Sophia, in what you're doing. You've got to be thinking ahead a little bit rather than reacting. If you just react, you don't have all the skills that you need for the next space. So you've got to be thinking ahead, and we'll talk a bit more about it, because then you can gather all that information that Phil and Anna are saying that you need, and be ready to make a move if you want to.
Okay, thank you all very much. That was really helpful.
Lovely. I think we probably have time for one more question if someone has one, either in the chat or again, feel free to raise your hand and speak. If not, then I think we have run into our break a little bit. So if there aren't any more questions, then I'd like to thank our speakers so far, and we'll have a quick 10-minute break and reconvene at 25 past, where Emma will give us a talk that's a bit more about careers and touching on the points that some of you guys have asked. I'm sure Emma will talk and touch on those topics later. So yeah, we'll reconvene at 25 past. Thank you so much for your questions. Thank you, speakers, so far. Yeah, see you guys in about 10 minutes. Thanks.
Lovely. Thanks, Megan.
Okay, that is the end of our break. It's 25 past, so hopefully people are around and we can get started. So our final segment of this session is some careers training, which Emma, who we've heard briefly from answering some questions, is just gonna give a talk through like finding the right career for you and what skills are important, and sort of that landscape of finding a job right now. A bit more general than some of the other talks we've had, but nevertheless very relevant. And hopefully she's going to provide some great insights for you. So Emma, if you would like to share your screen and start, that would be great.
Okay, I will do. Okay, cool. So hopefully you can see that for me, Megan. So
yeah,
first of all, thank you for having me back. I always love to come and talk to folk at the Institute of Physics. So my name is Emma Ford. I run a company called C4C Limited, and we do all things what I would call sort of people development, really. We do everything from careers to leadership to training, and we work with myself and my business partner Linda and about 25 associates. I'm probably the non-academic in the room, so I have a background which was originally corporate. So I was the person that people had to get past to get a job in a big global company. That included a lot of scientists coming into a big organization. So I'm quite curious about who's online. So could you just pop in the chat for me? Are you doing your first degree, master's, PhD, you know, are you working? Just so I've got a little bit of an idea of who I'm talking to. So just pop in the chat. Have a look. Who's here? PhD final year. Okay. Postdoc in the year. Oh, lovely. Okay. Just graduate, second year, working with PhD. Lovely. Okay. Okay, so you're all pretty much in either postdocs, doing masters, PhDs. Lovely. Great. So the second question is, what do you want to know? Not guarantee I can answer all the questions, but what is it that you want to know? Why are you here listening to me? What's on your mind? You can pop that in the chat. Nobody knows. So just pop in the chat, what is it you want to know? Increase my chances of getting a job in medical physics. Okay. Thank you, Lydia. Okay. Okay. Okay, knowledge to build this. Any house. Where's available medical physics? Continue to create. Okay. So hopefully the talks you've already had will start to answer some of these questions in terms of actually getting the clinical career and not finding out what it's like. Anything else that anybody wants? Okay. Oh, somebody's coming. What do I do after my degree? Chloe, thank you. There's a nice big broad question. Okay, so what to do? Try to figure out different pathways to work in medical physics, work out what's lovely. Okay. Okay. Lovely, thank you. That's a good start. Right, so this is about careers. It's about careers processes. What we're going to be looking at is a little bit about information and jobs data, what's out there, what the market is telling us, something about the tools and how you start thinking about you, and a little bit about career planning and processes. Okay. I will answer questions, but if we do those at the end, that would be great, because it's quite difficult, especially if you have sort of specific questions about yourself. And I'm going to look at Megan for this in the hope that she'll nod her head. We will send you slides, and we do have some handouts, but I've got another session that I'm going to run next week, and that's going to cover things like networking, recruitment processes, and also a little bit about how AI can help you as well. Okay. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of information, and then we're going to get you thinking about yourselves. What you will probably need a little bit later is a piece of paper and a pen, or some way of writing and jotting down some notes, because we're going to get you start building a little bit of criteria about you. So if you can just make sure you've got something where you can just jot down some notes, that would be great. So if we think about data, thinking about what's out there in terms of jobs information, I use an awful lot the Future of Jobs report, which is the World Economic Forum. They put out a report every few years, and they do what's happening now and what's going to be happening in the future. It's a really great document in terms of future-proofing yourself. They look at information from lots of different employers, employees, lots of different sectors, and they bring it all together. And it has masses of information about jobs. So key labour market drivers at the moment, probably of no surprise. Technological change, we know that's happening. Green transition is still there. Politically, depending on what happens in various countries, that may change, but there's still that green transition piece. The fact that there's a demographic shift, people are working longer, people are living longer, There's a big shift in that space. The geo-economic fragmentation, which I actually had to have a look up and see what that meant, and that's around the fact that the world is becoming a little bit more nationalized. So we're going less global and more national, and that's actually having an effect on the job market and also economic uncertainty. So those are the things that are out there that actually drive the labour market. Now, we've got this thing called the human machine frontier, what's happening in terms of the technology side of things. At the moment, you'll see actually we're looking at the fact that, you know, there is still that space in terms of people and jobs for people. And Anna was talking a little bit about it. But by 2030, they think there's going to be quite an equal distribution. Now, that's not to say that there's not going to be jobs there, but the jobs will change. Okay, we are not really clear what jobs might be there. All right. But you guys, with your background and your degree, are in a really good place to fit into this. Okay. What you need to do is to be aware of what is happening in the next 3-4 years so that you can keep pace. There's always been changes in what is happening in terms of the job front. When I left school, you know, I think I was one of the first people I knew who even touched a computer. You know, when I was working in a big corporate, one of the guys I was working with was horrified he had to do his own emails. But now what is happening is that the pace is much quicker. Okay, and we're much more aware of it, so we have to keep ahead of the game in terms of what is happening. And the more that you can do that, the more you will be prepared for any sort of move and transitions that you need to make. So in terms of what's out there, top hiring areas, healthcare and life sciences, there you go. Exactly the sort of areas that a lot of you want to get into. There is a persistent demand, okay? Nursing, allied health, clinical research, academia, biotech, it's all there for you, all right? So you're in a really, really good position, whether it's in NHS or it's academia, whether it's in industry, to get these jobs. But actually, with your background, you can pretty much go into anything, okay? You might not want to just, you know, use your science, but with the skill sets you have, you can move into a lot of different areas. So the technology and IT services, you know, green energy and sustainability, all those things that were in the first slide. But there's also construction, retail, hospitality, consulting, financial services. You'd be amazed the amount of people, especially in things like financial services and consulting, that want people with a physics background. Okay, they absolutely want people who can problem solve and who can analyze and manage data. All right, so you have the opportunity to stay in your field, which there's obviously a demand for, and actually we would encourage you to do that, but you also have options if you need them to go elsewhere. Now, where I start is around talking about career planning and career process. So what I want to do is to take you through a career sort of planning process, and then we're going to look at part of that process, and we're going to get you actually writing down some notes on yourself. Okay. So a typical career planning process for me, in terms of my world, starts with who you are, what motivates you, and what it is you really want to do. Okay, so that question about what do I do after my degree, then that's the good place to start. We have to try and define what that is. What we're then looking at is planning for your future. So what options do you have? You guys have a lot of options, a lot. Okay, there's a lot of people out there that will employ you. You have to know what's possible though, and you have to start to develop some different ideas, perhaps try some new things. You're then looking at how you match your skills, your competence, your strengths, and your interests to the ideas, to things that you want to do. You're then looking at understanding sort of the different application processes. Do you understand what actually is required? You'll then go into some form of selection. What do you need to prepare? You get your desired role, and you go, okay, so what next? Okay. This is a cyclical process. It doesn't stop once you've got your job. Right. In order to be prepared, to be strategic, you need to be reviewing this cycle probably every quarter, because who you are, what motivates you, and what you really want will change. Okay, and what we require from our futures and our jobs will change as well. So as we go through, we have to be reviewing this process so that we're ready to go when we actually need to make an application. So I would ask, how many of you have a master CV? And if you have a master CV, do you update it on a regular basis so that if that job comes, you can quickly move it through and target it to the organisation that you're interested in? Now, the majority of people come and talk to me in between sort of the application and selection process piece. They come and say, Emma, there's a job that I think I'm quite interested in. Can you help me with a CV? I will take them all the way back around the process to the values piece in order to understand them so that I can help them present themselves and market themselves. Okay. So what we're going to do for the next sort of 20, 25 minutes is look at that first half of the process. Okay. And what I'd like you to do is say, grab a pen and paper. And as we go through some of these things, I just want you to write some notes down. So you're starting to create a little bit of criteria on yourself. All right. Because that has to be the starting point before you look at any particular jobs. So what we're going to look at is anchors and values. We're going to talk a little bit about skills. We're going to look at strengths, interests, and experiences. And then we're going to try and pull all that together. Okay. I'm going to assume unless somebody shouts at me that you're all with me, and we'll keep going. So the starting point for me is around the anchors and the values, the preferences, the things that actually are so important to us that if they weren't there, life would be quite challenging and would cause us a certain amount of tension. There's some work done by somebody called Edgar Schein, called Career Anchors, and this is what I'm just going to talk through with you now. Edgar Schein over the years has interviewed thousands and thousands of people, and he's tracked back, and what he's found is there's about 8 areas that when he talks to people keep coming back in terms of what has kept them in the spaces that they're working. Okay, so let me talk through them. I'm going to read out some definitions for you. And as I'm going, have a think about perhaps which 2 relate to you and just make a note of them. Okay, so we have technical and function. And this is individuals who enjoy being good at specific tasks and will work hard in order to develop the specific and necessary skills to complete them. Okay, so this is about specific tasks and developing specific skills for technical and function. We then have general and managerial. So this is people who thrive off performing in a position of responsibility, tackling high-level problems, building relationships, and interacting with others. They require strong emotional intelligence skills in order to succeed. So quite different to the technical piece, to technical functional piece, right? You then have autonomy and independence, and these people need to be left to their own devices and to be able to act without needing too much direction, interference, or confirmation. Often avoiding standards and procedures, but to do things their own way. Okay, the people actually who would like to work really by themselves and do their own thing. You then have entrepreneurial creativity. So these are creatives within a business or an organization. They enjoy brainstorming and inventing new things. They also often seek to run or start new businesses. And they're very different from the people who seek autonomy because they will actually work with others and share their workload. All right. They like taking ownership of their work. They often get bored and will seek monetary gain. All right. So then we have pure challenge. And these are folk that are driven entirely by the need to be continuously stimulated by new challenges and tasks which test their abilities to solve problems. They will often seek to move jobs when their current position becomes stagnant or they no longer possess the challenges they need to progress. Okay, so interestingly, previous speakers saying that they get bored and they move on, that pure challenge space comes into it. Okay. We then have security and stability. So it's people who seek stable and predictable positions and activities, and which they're able to plan aspects of their life around. They take few risks. They're also often individuals who will spend many years in the same position. That's much harder to do now in today's job market. So if that's an anchor of yours, that's a bigger challenge for you to find the right roles. Lifestyle. This is individuals who orientate everything, including their role, around the pattern of living as a whole. It's not so much balancing the work and life, but integrating it. Okay, so they may take long periods of leave to do something that they really enjoy that is outside of work, but it's about the integration of their work and their life. And then finally, you have service and dedication to cause. And these are individuals who always seek new ways to help others, both within and outside the organisation, using their talents. Okay, so they may be found in customer services or HR, but actually that outward facing, making sure people are okay space. So what I'd like you to do, and we will send this information to you, just select 2 and write them down somewhere, make a note of them, and then we'll start in terms of sort of building our little picture of ourselves. Okay. And if I give you an example, so over a number of years, probably the past 10 or 12 years, I've been working with somebody called Nora. She's a physicist. I met her on a course many years ago, and every couple of years, 18 months, she'd contact me and say, I'm bored, Emma, and I don't know what to do, and I'm fed up. And I did this with her, and she comes out as technical function and pure challenge. Okay. Now, what's really interesting is that Nora contacted me last year and had been offered the most amazing sort of job. She's working in consultancy now to go and set up an office in Australia. And she wasn't quite sure if she wanted to do it or not. And all of a sudden, pure challenge as a preference and as an anchor had changed, and actually her lifestyle had come in because she'd bought a house, she had a great friendship group, and she wasn't quite sure actually that she wanted to change. So these things can change a little bit as we go. But what you will find is if you look back over your career, these things become quite prominent in terms of actually anchoring you to certain roles. So I would look at pure challenge and autonomy. Okay, I don't like being told what to do, and I get bored quickly. This is why I'm running my own business. Okay, and if I look back over my career, all the jobs I've had have allowed me to do my own thing, even when I was in a big corporate. And actually, I would have my jobs changed every 18 months or 2 years, or something would be added to it. All right. So write down a couple so that you're starting the process. So if we take this a stage further and take it almost down a level, and we look at what I would call values, okay? Things that are so important to you that if you do not have them and you can't fulfill them, you're going to really struggle in terms of how you feel about yourselves. I believe very strongly that your values are quite similar, both work and at home. And it will be your value set that come out at work. So I have a very strong value set around trust. And from a business point of view, I will not work with anybody that I have to actually sign massive contracts with, especially if they work for me, because I don't trust they're going to turn up if they've got to really sign a big contract. Okay, the contract for me is yes, I'll turn up. I also have a big value set around how people are treated. And I actually left a job because of how people were treated, because it made me feel actually quite ill. So have a look at the list. There may be some others, and just select 2 or 3 from this list around values that you think are important to you, because this is all the top part of that process. Okay. Okay, so I'll move on unless anybody opens their mic and shouts loudly at me. Okay. So then we're going to talk a little bit about skills. So World Economic Forum again, this piece about future-proofing yourself, this piece about actually being able to predict what will be needed. Again, it was part of a conversation in terms of that transferable skills piece. Core skills in 2025, analytical thinking, fabulous. I hope all of you can do that analytical thinking. That's a job you're in. I suspect that you're pretty resilient and flexible in terms of the jobs you do. Leadership and social influence, that's quite an interesting one. Can you lead yourself? Can you lead others? Can you influence? Creative thinking, motivation and self-awareness, literacy from a technology point of view, empathy, that soft, very soft skill space, curiosity, that piece about always learning that was mentioned, always wanting to develop, talent management, so understanding how actually you can develop other people, and that service orientation piece. So that's what they think is happening now within in the workplace. Okay. Have a little look. So this is sort of the top 10. There's usually about sort of 20 on this list. Have a little look because I'm pretty sure you can tick off some of these. Okay. I suspect if I sat down with you, I could say, yes, you can do this and you can do that. Okay. Right, so now we're going to move to the predicted skills, which is the 2030. Okay, quite different. So creative thinking stays the same, technological literacy goes up, but you've got those AI big data piece and the networks and the cybersecurity piece. Okay, but you've still got the lifelong learning, the leadership, analytical thinking has gone down, environmental stewardship has come up. Now, this is predicted. They may do a report in the next 18 months and it may change slightly. But if you're thinking about jobs for the next 3 or 4 years, what might you need to develop? What might you need to know? What might you need to get experience in order to future-proof yourself? Okay. And the AI and big data isn't necessarily being in that field. It's being aware, having awareness of it so that you can use it in your field. It's not about actually being a technical specialist in it. Okay. So again, have a little look and see, okay, so what might I need to have a think about? Can I already do some of these things? Some of them are transferred over, so you should be able to do some of them. So many organizations now also talk about strengths, and especially if you're going into recruitment selection processes. So if we talk about strengths and skills, sometimes it's a very similar language. And what I'm about to show you, some of the language used in terms of what the World Economic Forum require and call skills may be called strengths as well. So there's a little bit of overlap in terms of language. But there was some work done by the Centre of Applied Psychology at Warwick University, probably about 12 or 13 years ago, which started to look at strengths, and strengths being about things that energize you. A lot of organizations are starting to use strength in terms of their recruitment processes. So I certainly know Glaxo certainly use strength from a point of view of their first part of their graduate program and their intern program. Okay, you have to have a strength-based interview before you're allowed to send in an application form. And then their interviews are all about strengths. So if we talk about strengths versus skills, so the main difference between strengths is that actually a skill is a particular ability which actually can be developed through practice and repetition. Strengths is an ability that you have inherently, okay? And you will be able to do it whether you learn it or not, okay? Now, what it does say is that you can develop in your skills by using your strengths by using your skills, okay? So they're quite different. So skills around communication and time management, and actually your strengths tend to be more traits around curiosity and emotional intelligence. Okay. Their research says that actually people who have the opportunity to focus on their strengths are much more likely to be engaged in their jobs and are much more likely to have an excellent sort of health and life in general, okay? Because they're energized, because strengths are things that energize us, all right? And that's really important when we're starting to look at work, okay? Very easy for us to go into jobs that actually don't interest and energize us. So in terms of how the language that they use, what we talk about is realized strengths. So things that you are good at, you perform well, that energize you and that you use. Okay. You have to use them quite wisely, because if you overuse them, they can become learnt behaviors. Okay. Unrealized strengths, things that actually you do well, that they energize you, but you don't use so much. They're a lower use. Okay. And you have to do more of them because you're missing out on using those things that energize you in your life. Your learned behaviors are things that actually you do well, but they actually are quite de-energizing and you don't use them a lot. We find quite a lot of people are doing jobs that focused on their learned behaviors. Okay, they're doing things because they're really good at it, but they don't actually get energized by them. And then you have your weaknesses. These are things that actually you don't do very well. They don't energize you. And again, you've got variable use. Now, research says that people spend the majority of their time trying to develop their weaknesses. Okay. And that actually you can spend a lot of time trying to develop your weaknesses, but they won't get that much better because they're your weaknesses and because you don't enjoy doing it. So what you have to do in order to help yourself and develop yourself is focus on the things that energize you. So your realized strength and your unrealized strength, keep making those better and developing those, and then your weaknesses will actually increase as well, will get better as well and develop as you go. All right. So this is about using strengths, especially in terms of when you work, about things that energize you and that you can do well. So in a moment, I'm going to put up a list of strengths. Again, the language might be similar in terms of the skills shown by the World Economic Forum. But what I'd like you to do is select 2 realized strengths, 2 unrealized strengths, 2 learned behaviors and 2 weaknesses. Okay, and just write them down on your little lists. So here you go. Okay, so that's 2 realized strengths, 2 unrealized, 2 learnt behaviors and 2 weaknesses. Okay, and I'll move on unless somebody opens their mic and shouts very loudly at me. And so you'll get all this information anyway, so this is just to get you started with the thought process. So if we look at that in a slightly different way, but we also look at what energizes us in terms of our interests, because that's really important. We've got to be interested in terms of what we're doing. We can also sort of have the same space. So actually, what are we good at versus how much do we enjoy it? And so what we're looking for is to find roles in terms of the interest that I enjoy and I'm good at, or the interest I enjoy but need to develop. So that learning piece. Again, we get quite a lot of people that are in that top left-hand box, which is about things that you're good at but you don't enjoy. So again, just have a little think about whatever it could be that interests you. So it could be your medical physics. What is it about your medical physics and your physics study that you enjoy? It could be actually something completely different. Okay. It could be that you love working with people. All right. So just pop down for each of the interests I enjoy and I'm very good at, and the interests I enjoy and I need to develop a couple of things in terms of the interest space. Okay, and so I'll move on again, unless somebody shouts at me. Okay. And then we have our experiences. Okay. Now, this is some work that I did with a colleague, and we interviewed senior managers, sort of mainly in the academic space, but actually now, because we work a lot in the NHS, coaching senior leaders there, but also in industry. And these are the experiences that they said made them successful. And they do transfer to all sectors. Okay. So as I'm talking through, just sort of make a note of actually, do you have experience? Do you have evidence of these different things? This will be degrees of at the moment. Okay. It's in terms of actually where you are in your career. So are you specialists? Yes. You are specialists. So that's a good start. And specialist doesn't have to be academic. It could be, I'm a specialist in procurement, or I'm a specialist in finance. Okay. But are you a specialist? Can you deliver a project? So these are the things that made these people successful. Project delivery. Have you or are you working in other sectors? So are you very narrow in terms of how you're working, or are you broader? Okay, so that piece about not even in the other departments, but are you actually moving into other sectors? So industry and academia, the NHS, are you actually sort of creating a whole bandwidth of areas you're working with? Do you have a strategic understanding of what is happening in your team, your department, your organization? You may not have that at the moment, but be aware that that becomes quite important. Strategically understanding what is happening, where your department or your team is going, what's the intent? Can you build and maintain networks? We'll talk about networking in the second session. Can you lead and work with others? Okay, leading is not about having a title. Okay, it's not about having a little sign that says leadership. We all lead, but can you lead something? Cross-discipline collaboration. So are you working with other departments if you're at university? If you're in work, it could be that I'm working with the engineers and I'm working with finance and I'm working with the lawyers. So how can you cross over and bring all those areas together? Can you lead and manage change? Really important, especially in today's world. Things move so quickly that actually you must be able to manage change for yourself and for others. Can you communicate internally and externally? And you heard that was so important in terms of transferable skill. Do you understand how to get money, that funding, grant success, budgets? Do you understand how to be able to apply for and get resources and finances? The entrepreneurial creativity, that's about resources and actually how you use your resources. The commercial side sometimes seems a bit financial, but actually it's not. It's about all of your resources, and that could include your people. So can you use your resources creatively? Do you understand how to do that? And do you actually understand the finance space? Do you understand the accounts, the budgets, and how finance works? And again, you might not have that knowledge and experience at the moment, but it's something that you might want to think about. How do you get? Okay, depending on where you are. Now, these people also had, goes back to the strengths a little bit, the personal attributes: resilience, drive, self-confidence, emotional intelligence. And the most important thing that they all had was a significant other. They had somebody in their camp. They had a champion. And for some, it was their partner, a colleague, a boss, a mentor. Somebody saying to them, yes, of course you can do that. Go and apply for that job because you'll be great at it. Okay? They all had somebody in their camp. So have a little think. Who is it that is in your camp? Okay. Who is it that's going to say, of course, that's brilliant, Megan, off you go, do that. Of course you can do it. Okay. Because that will change. And at that point, you may apply for the jobs and the positions that you never would have done before. Okay. I got a job and I used to work in BP. And the only reason I got that job is because I was very young and my dad kept saying, apply for that job. Apply for that job. Okay. And I kept saying, oh, no, I can't do that, Dad. It's the big company. Apply for that job. I think I was about 18. Okay. So he was my significant other at that point. And I would never have applied for that job if he hadn't had the faith in me to do it. All right. So really important that you work out who that is. Now, bringing all this together, there is just so much information out there and so many opportunities for people like yourselves. Okay. So here we go. You could do all of these things. Okay. You might have to retrain, but you have the academic knowledge, the drive, the motivation to do most, or if not all of these different things. Okay. And there's just so much there. So there's a point that says, where do I start? So one of the things I say to people, and again, we will send this to you, is when you have this, just draw a cross or take out anything that doesn't interest you. Look at it and immediately go, no, not interested in anything to do with travel, you know, in terms of an industry, not interested in working in charities, take it out. Okay. And what you should end up with is then sort of 2 or 3 that you're quite focused on. What you're then able to do is to look at your criteria about yourself and say, how can I manage that within these areas? And I will have to do some research about that. So I'm starting to formulate questions I might need to ask when I do my research on these organizations. Okay. Can they fulfill what I need, what I'm interested in, what's going to energize me? So if we bring all this together and we think about this in terms of a career, okay, and we talk about a career, in my world, this is my world, career is what really interests you, what talents you have, what motivates you, and what your values are. Okay. Now, the interesting thing about a career is that sometimes it's quite scary. Okay, because it makes you feel like you've got to be doing something for the next 20 years. And as we said, nowadays, actually, career has very much changed. And this is a few years old, this slide, but actually, it's really quite interesting in terms of traditional careers in the dark blue, which is around job security, 1 or 2 organizations. Actually, you know, your career was managed by the organization. Okay. Whereas now, you're going into, you know, flexibility, lots of different directions. You might have a number of different jobs, organizations you work for. You might have 2 or 3 different careers. Okay, you're responsible for your own career path. And actually, your loyalty is probably to you rather than the organization you work for. And people are looking for something that's more meaningful, okay, in terms of what they do. All right. So they're very, very different in terms of what people are looking for now. Now, what I would say for some people, it's about the career and the role and the job. For some people, it's actually about finding the right organization to work for that can deliver what they want in terms of what energizes them and their interests. Okay, so sometimes people need to look for the organisation, sometimes it's the career space. So one way of looking at careers is this. This is Ikigai, and it's lovely. It's a Japanese concept meaning a reason for being, which we love. So we can look at what we love, what the world needs, what we can be paid for, and what we're good at. Okay. And then we have some sort of passion, a mission, a vocation, and a profession. And everybody needs a purpose. Okay, and part of your purpose is your values and your anchors. But actually, we need to understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. But what we have to be careful of is that actually, as you'll see in the little insert, if you get what you love and what the world needs, then actually you might have great delight, but no wealth. If you have what the world needs and what can be paid for, actually lots of excitement, but perhaps a little bit of uncertainty. Okay, if you get paid well and it's what you're good at, you might feel really comfortable, but perhaps not quite so fulfilled, a bit empty. And actually, if you've got what you're good at and what you love, there's a great sense of satisfaction, but maybe you're not feeling like you're fulfilling yourself again, it's that bit useless. So depending on your language, and we all have different ways of thinking about these things, a lot of people like this Ikigai type model in terms of trying to work out what they want. So you could actually start to put in what you love, what you think the world needs, so the purpose, what you want to be paid for, and what you're good at, and you can start to build a picture. Another way of looking at it is to have what we would call a project plan about you. So here we go, a simple project plan. And I'll just talk through it in terms of giving you an idea that you can start to complete this. And as we're going through some of the information that you've taken on yourself over the past sort of half an hour, you should start to be able to put into here. Okay. So this is the starting point. You've got to put your data and your information in one place. So your anchors and your values, your purpose. We all as human beings need purpose. If we don't have a purpose, we're not going to get up in the morning. Okay, so what's your purpose? What are you trying to do? What's important to you? We've then got your short, medium, and long-term goals. That's both professional and personal, and I'll come back to those in a moment. Your resources, what do you have and what do you need? So what are your interests and what are your experiences? What are your strengths? What's your gap analysis between what you have and what you need? So what are you going to develop? Bit of a plan, got to have a bit of a plan, bit of a strategy. And then in the little left-hand corner, that piece about constraints and compromise. So what is going to stop you getting what you want? Now, if we talk about the goals, what we're talking about is having, some people have what I would call a professional driver. Their career is very, very important to them. Some people have a personal driver. Okay, live to work, work to live. So I always say I have a very personal driver. I love my job. I want to be really interested. I want to be valued in what I do, but I need to earn enough money to keep my horse. He's highly important to me. Okay, it's very personal, but it's very important. I'm not traditionally ambitious. Okay, doesn't mean to say I don't want a really interesting, challenging job, but actually what drives me might be different to somebody else. So we need to decide what drives us, okay? We might also have a partner, and we might put our partner on there as well, because sometimes what our partner needs and what we need happens at different times. Now, if we're looking at the long term, one of the conversations we quite often have with people is sort of what would they like their life in 5 years' time to look and feel like, okay? And quite often people say, I'd like to be happy. So we then have to say, well, what might make you happy? Okay. Some people are very clear. They would like to be this manager in this NHS department doing this. They're very clear about what they want to do. And then what we're trying to do is be quite strategic and track back, in that if we understand what we're trying to achieve, it's much easier for us to be strategic and track back to get the experiences that we need. So in my world, the job that you're doing now should deliver the skills and ability and the knowledge you need to get the job, the next job. Okay. and so on and so forth. So that learning piece. Okay. What you're looking to be is proactive rather than reactive. And if people who only end up and work in that short term tend to be reactive, and they tend to be actually just taking a step and they don't actually get where they want to go. So people who have clear goals and aspirations will be more successful than people who don't, because they will implicitly work towards their futures. Okay. Now, that's very easy for me to say. It's much harder for people to do. All right. But what I would challenge you to do is to start thinking about what that future might be. So a lovely colleague of ours terms it as having bricks, walls, and cathedrals. Okay. If you're building a cathedral, you're not going to start with the colour of your brick. You're going to start with what you want the cathedral to look like. And then you're going to build your walls. All right. So you've got to start tracking back. Now, what we then have to do is to say, well, actually, potentially, if I can track back, I might need to think, well, I need experience managing a team. So how do I get that? I might decide that I need to learn a language. How do I get that? It might be that I might need to go and live in a different country. How do I do that? And I start to put that in my project plan. But I need to review my project plan as well, okay? Because all plans need reviewing. You might also need to actually do that slightly sort of bendy road that Phil showed, okay? So my goddaughter, Gemma, she has a medical science degree, I think from Cardiff, and about 6 or 7 years ago, I went to see her and she was working in a mobile phone shop, having just got her degree. So I said, why are you doing that, Gemma? And her reply was, because I need to earn money, Auntie M. I said, right, okay. So we need to think about this. So what we did is she had a clear idea of the organisation she wanted to work in. Okay, she was quite clear about that. She wanted to work in their lab. So she phoned them up. She asked them who they use in terms of their temporary staff and their temporary admin staff. Okay. Within about 6 weeks, she was working on the reception of their head office. Okay, on a temporary contract, weekly contract. She stayed there for about 2 months. That gave her access to all of the organisation's jobs and intranet site and all of the internal jobs that were going. And after about 2 months, she was asked to go back, and a job came up in the lab, a contract job came up in the lab, which she took. She's now been there for 6 or 7 years, and now she runs all of their training. Okay, so she could have stayed in the mobile phone shop, or she could go and work in a temporary position, doing admin, not really what she wanted to do, but it put her in the right position, okay, to get the job that she wanted. So that's where sometimes you have to have different plans. Now, the bottom left-hand box, that piece about constraints, compromise, assumptions, becomes quite a challenge. So these are the things that are going to stop you potentially getting to your goal. So my very lovely sister only ever wanted to work 15 minutes from home. That limited her earning capacity. Okay. And so when we would have conversations about the fact that I earned much more money than she did, that's because I'll get on a plane to Germany, or I'll go to Warwick, or I'll go down to Bournemouth. Okay. So actually her compromise was that actually she had to decide whether she wanted to earn the salary she thought she was worth, or whether she wanted to stay at home. Okay. Work with a lot of MBAs, lovely MBAs, who quite often want to be management consultants because it's very sexy and they're going to earn a lot of money. And in that box, they quite often put work-life balance. And I have to shatter their dreams that if they earn a 6-figure salary, then I'm going to own them. Okay. And they're not going to have a work-life balance. So it's then actually, what am I going to balance? Do I want the big salary, or do I want the work life? Okay. And part of actually having that means that when I look at my long-term goals, my long-term vision, actually I can manage some of the things that actually might stop me. Okay, or I can make the decisions around it. Okay, so I'd encourage you all to put some form of plan down. Use some of the information that we've already started to talk about to start populating lists. All right, because this will allow you to ask the right questions, especially when we get to things like networking and researching markets, which we're going to talk about next time. So what I'm going to do when we've just I'll stop sharing. I'm going to put something in the chat for you, something else for you to do over the next week. And that's a little bit of a diagnostic, okay? You can't see this very clearly, but what we want you to do is just have a look at it, and it'll start to give you some ideas about what it is you might want, okay? So that bit about researching the market will help. Now, typically, people make their decisions based on the skills they have and what they want to develop, and what they need, so in terms of location. But the things that are actually going to make their work fulfilling is what interests them, what values they have, and actually if a role fits their personality. Okay. So we're just going to have a little think about that, and I'll pop it in the chat when we've finished. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to pop that in the chat, and then I am very happy to answer any questions. So let me do that whilst, if anybody has any questions, they can either unmute or they can pop them in the chat. Let me just do this.
Thank you, Emma. Yeah, we have about 5 minutes for questions if anyone has any. And yeah, Emma will be back in our session next week. Along with, we'll have speakers from backgrounds in clinical science talking you through the STP and that process, and people who work in academia to ask more targeted questions for those roles next time. But if you have any questions generally or anything that Emma could help with, then you have 5 minutes to do so. Just see if there's any in the chat.
Silenced everybody.
No takers this time, perhaps.
Oh, here we go. Yes.
Are you going to share a recording of next week's session? If you're registered, then you'll have a recording of this session when it's done, and also next week's session. So if you can't make a next week's session, don't worry, that'll be sent out to you along with this one as well. Anything else from anyone? Do you want to briefly run through what you're going over in the next session to give everyone something
So next
to think
week
about?
we're going to talk a little bit about recruitment processes. Okay, we're going to talk about networking. Majority of people, as they go through their careers, will get their jobs through networking, and there are a large proportion of jobs that are not advertised. Okay, so you will only get them through networking. So we're going to talk about networking. We're going to get you thinking about how you can network slightly differently. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how AI fits into the recruitment and selection processes, okay, and what you can do to use it, but also perhaps some of the little disadvantages of it as well.
Lovely. If there are no questions for the time being, then I'll thank Emma again
You're
for
welcome.
that really lovely careers talk. So, oh, someone asking for you to share your email and a website if you have one. So the next session, as I said, is going to be focused on the STP and clinical science, full of people talking through the application process for that, their experience doing that, and how they're finding doing the STP, and then also having talks from people who are doing PhDs and oh, thanks, Emma, and from academics, so exploring those two career paths as well. Also going to take this opportunity to advertise, obviously, the Institute of Physics, Medical Physics Special Research, Special Interest Group, which is where this is has originated from. So if you would like to join up to the IOP and the medical physics group will be able to keep running events like this. And we have lots of other stuff. I have to advertise for next week on Friday, I believe, is the medical physics group is running the annual translation meeting, which this time's on imaging and detectors, which is held, I believe, at the IOP in London, and there'll be loads of talks from people in academia and industry. So if you want to go and do some networking, an event like that, that'd be a great opportunity to talk to people who work in that. And I'll put the link for that in the chat now. And if you're an IOP member, that is free as well. So if you're interested in that in doing that and networking with people who are currently working in industry and academia, that'd be a really good opportunity. Actually, I'll just put the link in the chat there. So yeah, thank you all again for coming. It's the same time next week, 2 o'clock on Wednesday the 3rd. I believe you should already have the Zoom link. But thank you so much. And yeah, we'll send a recording of this session and the next one to you. And I believe also Phil and Anna have left their email and contacts if you have any more questions for them as well. But thank you to the speakers and thank you for all of you. And I'll see you next week, hopefully. Thank you.